The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Amelia Foster's bedroom as her alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. She reached over to silence it before it woke her husband Paul, who didn't need to be up for another hour. Amelia's back screamed in protest as she sat up on the edge of the bed. The pain had become her constant companion over the last 3 years, ever since a drunk driver had slammed into her car on her way home from a late-night emergency surgery. Amelia made her way to the bathroom, closing the door quietly behind her. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. The dark circles under her eyes had become permanent fixtures on her once vibrant face. At 42, she looked a decade older. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened the medicine cabinet. Behind the normal items, toothpaste, face cream, and bandages, she pushed aside a box of cotton swabs to reveal 2 orange prescription bottles. She shook out 2 pills from the first bottle and 1 from the second, then swallowed them dry. She needed to be steady for today's surgeries. The medication would take the edge off without making her too drowsy. At least that's what she told herself. Riverdale was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. As the town's most respected surgeon, Amelia couldn't afford to show weakness. The 20,000 residents of Riverdale trusted her with their lives. Many had been her patients. At some point during her 15 years at Riverdale General Hospital, her reputation was perfect, skilled, compassionate, and completely dependable. No one knew about the pills. Not Paul, not her colleagues, not her 2 teenage children, Jake and Olivia. Amelia had become expert at hiding her growing dependence. "Morning, Mom," Olivia said as Amelia entered the kitchen. At 16, Olivia was already showing interest in following her mother's footsteps into medicine. She sat at the kitchen table with a biology textbook open beside her cereal bowl. "You're up early," Amelia said, forcing a smile as she started the coffee maker. The pills were beginning to work, dulling the sharp pain that radiated from her lower back. "Big test today," Olivia explained. "Dad said he'd drive me in early so I can study in the library first period." Amelia nodded, grateful she wouldn't need to drive the kids today. Her hands were steadier when she didn't have to focus on traffic. "Where's your brother?" "Still asleep. He doesn't have practice until after school." Amelia poured her coffee and checked her phone. She had 3 surgeries scheduled today. A routine appendectomy at 7:30, a hernia repair at 10 yas, and a gallbladder removal at 1 p.m. Diane Miller, a 4th-grade teacher at Riverdale Elementary, was her afternoon patient. Amelia had removed Diane's husband's appendix 2 years earlier. The Miller family had sent her a Christmas card every year since. By the time Amelia arrived at the hospital at 6:45 a.m., the morning dose of medication had fully kicked in. She felt almost normal as she greeted the nurses at the surgical floor. "Nurses station." "Morning, Dr. Foster," said Linda Scott, the head surgical nurse who had worked alongside Amelia for nearly a decade. "Mr. Perez is prepped and ready. His wife brought homemade cookies for the staff again." Amelia smiled. "Save me one for after surgery." She headed to the locker room to change into her scrubs, careful not to let anyone see how she steadied herself against the wall when a wave of dizziness hit her. The morning surgeries went smoothly. The appendectomy was textbook perfect, and the hernia repair took even less time than expected. Between procedures, Amelia slipped into the bathroom and took another pill from a small container she kept in her pocket. "Just half a dose," she told herself. Just enough to get through the day. Lunch was a protein bar eaten hurriedly while reviewing Diane Miller's chart. Amelia noticed her hands shaking slightly as she turned the pages. She flexed her fingers and took a deep breath. The tremors weren't visible to others yet, but she knew the signs. She needed another dose before the gallbladder surgery, but she'd have to be careful. Too much and she'd be noticeably impaired. Too little, and the pain would make it impossible to concentrate. In the bathroom stall, Amelia's fingers fumbled with the pill container. She dropped it and several pills scattered across the floor. Panic surged through her as she scrambled to collect them before someone came in. She managed to gather all but one, which had rolled under the divider into the next stall. Her heart pounded as she heard the main door open. "Dr. Foster, are you in here?" It was Linda's voice. "We're ready to prep Mrs. Miller." Be right there, Amelia called, quickly swallowing one of the recovered pills. She flushed the toilet to explain her presence and washed her hands, avoiding her own reflection in the mirror. The operating room was cool and bright, the familiar environment usually calming her nerves. Today, though, Amelia felt on edge. The medication wasn't working as well as it should. She could feel the pain creeping back, along with a foggy feeling that clouded her thoughts. BP is 120/80, pulse 72. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Sam Green, reported as Diane Miller lay unconscious on the table. She's ready for you, Dr. Foster. Amelia nodded and held out her hand. Scalpel. The first incision was clean. Amelia worked methodically, her muscle memory taking over where her focus faltered. Linda stood across from her, anticipating her needs as she always did. Dr. Kevin Howard, a younger surgeon who often assisted Amelia, monitored the procedure from behind her shoulder. 20 minutes into the surgery, Amelia felt the room begin to tilt. The light seemed suddenly too bright, then too dim. Sweat beaded on her forehead beneath her surgical cap. Dr. Foster? Linda's voice sounded distant. Are you all right? Amelia tried to respond, but her tongue felt heavy in her mouth. The scalpel in her hand seemed to weigh 100 pounds. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision. She began, but couldn't finish the sentence. The surgical field blurred before her eyes. Dr. Foster. Linda's voice was sharp now, alarmed. Something's wrong. Dr. Howard, take over. Amelia felt her knees buckle. The room spun wildly around her. She was vaguely aware of hands grabbing her arms as she started to fall. The scalpel clattered to the floor. Then everything went black. She woke to the sound of beeping monitors. For a confused moment, Amelia thought she was still in surgery. Then she realized she was the one in the hospital bed, not performing the operation. An IV dripped fluid into her arm. The clock on the wall showed 4:45 p.m. She's awake, a voice said. Hospital Administrator William Carter stood at the foot of her bed, his expression grim. Next to him was Chief of Surgery Dr. Alan Bennett, looking equally somber. What happened? Amelia asked, her mouth dry. Is Diane Miller okay? Mrs. Miller's fine, Dr. Bennett said. Dr. Howard completed the procedure without complications. You collapsed in the operating room, Amelia, Carter said, using her first name, something he rarely did. Your blood work showed dangerously high levels of oxycodone and Valium in your system. The reality of the situation crashed down on Amelia. Years of careful hiding undone in an instant. Her career, her reputation, everything she had built, all now hanging by a thread. The State Medical Board has been notified. Carter continued, his voice formal now. Your medical license is suspended pending investigation. Hospital security has already collected your badge and access cards. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. I can explain, she started, but couldn't find the words to continue. What could she possibly say? Paul is on his way, Dr. Bennett said, his tone softer. We've arranged for a private room upstairs away from the surgical floor. As they left her alone, Amelia stared at the ceiling. News would spread through Riverdale like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone would know that their trusted Dr. Foster had passed out during surgery because she was high on pills. The shame was overwhelming. Outside her room, she could hear nurses whispering. Through the window, she could see the small town of Riverdale spread out below the hospital hill. The same town that had once held her in such high regard would now watch her fall from grace. And this was only the beginning of the scandal that would leave Riverdale in deep shock. Paul Foster rushed through the hospital doors with a look of panic on his face. The text message from the hospital administrator had been brief and alarming. Amelia collapsed during surgery. Come immediately. The receptionist directed him to a private room on the 3rd floor, away from the busy surgical wing where his wife had worked for years. When Paul entered the room, he found Amelia sitting up in bed, her face pale and eyes red from crying. A police officer stood by the window. Taking notes, what's going on? Paul asked, looking between his wife and the officer. The officer, a woman named Officer Judy Martinez, closed her notebook. Mr. Foster, I'm with the Riverdale Police Department. We're conducting an initial investigation into the incident in the operating room today. Paul sat on the edge of Amelia's bed and took her hand. Investigation? I thought she just collapsed. Is this about medical malpractice? Officer Martinez's expression remained neutral. Sir, your wife had dangerous levels of controlled substances in her system while performing surgery. We need to determine where these drugs came from and if any laws were broken. The truth hit Paul like a physical blow. He looked at Amelia, whose eyes were now fixed on the blanket covering her legs. Amelia? I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Officer Martinez excused herself, promising to return the next day for a formal statement. As the door closed, behind her, Paul's shock turned to anger. How long? He demanded. How long have you been taking drugs? Amelia flinched at his tone. Since the accident, my back, the pain never went away. The prescribed doses stopped working, so I started taking more. 3 years? You've been hiding this for 3 years? Paul stood up and paced the small room. You could have killed someone today, Amelia. You were operating on people while high. I was careful, Amelia said weakly. I always made sure I could function. Until today, Paul shot back. My God, what were you thinking? What about the kids? Have they heard yet? The mention of their children broke something in Amelia. She began to sob, her shoulders shaking. Please don't tell them, not yet. Paul ran his hands through his hair in frustration. He wanted to comfort his wife, but the betrayal felt too fresh, too raw. The woman he thought he knew better than anyone had been living a double life, putting patients at risk and lying to him daily. The whole town will know by morning, he said finally. We can't hide this from Jake and Olivia. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Bennett entered carrying a clipboard. Paul, good, you're here. Amelia, we've arranged for you to be transferred to Lakeside Recovery Center tomorrow morning. It's a private facility about 2 hours from here, specializing in healthcare professionals with substance issues. Amelia nodded numbly. What about Diane Miller, the patient I was operating on? She's fine, Dr. Bennett assured her. She's been told you had a medical emergency. The details are confidential for now. For now, Amelia repeated bitterly. But everyone will find out eventually. Dr. Bennett didn't deny it. The hospital board is meeting tonight to discuss next steps. There will be an official investigation and the medical board will conduct their own review. I won't sugarcoat this, Amelia. It's serious. After Dr. Bennett left, Paul and Amelia sat in heavy silence. Finally, Paul spoke. I need to get home to the kids. I'll tell them you're sick and staying at the hospital overnight. We can figure out what to say tomorrow. Amelia reached for his hand, but Paul moved away. I need time, Amelia. It's too much right now. He left without looking back, leaving Amelia alone with her thoughts and the steady beep of the heart monitor. The next morning, news of the incident spread through Riverdale like a wildfire. At Riverdale High School, Jake Foster was changing for gym class when he overheard 2 boys talking. Did you hear about Dr. Foster? My mom works at the hospital. She said the doctor passed out during surgery because she was high on drugs. Jake froze, his shirt halfway over his head. What did you say? He demanded, approaching the boys. The taller boy, not realizing who Jake was, continued eagerly. Yeah, Dr. Foster was operating while drugged up. They took away her license and everything. My mom said they found a bunch of pills. Jake's fist connected with the boy's jaw before he could finish his sentence. Within seconds, the locker room erupted into chaos as other boys pulled Jake away, his knuckles bloody and tears streaming down his face. Across town, at the hospital, investigators from the state medical board combed through Amelia's records. They interviewed nurses, fellow doctors, and pharmacy staff. The picture that emerged was troubling. For months, there had been small discrepancies in the medication logs on Amelia's floor. Occasional reports of her appearing tired or disoriented had been dismissed as overwork or stress. Linda Scott, the surgical nurse who had worked with Amelia for years, sat in the hospital administrator's office, wringing her hands. I should have said something sooner, she admitted. There were signs. Times when Dr. Foster seemed off, but she was always so competent, so respected. I told myself I was imagining things. William Carter, the hospital administrator, looked curious, and several staff members have said similar things. Everyone saw pieces of the puzzle, but no one put them together. The investigation expanded to include Gregory Peters, a pharmaceutical sales representative who had frequent meetings with Amelia. Security footage showed him visiting her office numerous times, often leaving his sample case behind. When questioned, Greg initially denied any wrongdoing. But faced with the evidence, he eventually admitted to supplying Amelia with sample medications meant for patients with chronic pain. She said it was for research, he claimed. I didn't know she was taking them herself. Meanwhile, at Lakeside Recovery Center, Amelia checked in under a cloud of shame. The intake nurse recognized her name immediately. We've had several doctors here before, the nurse said kindly as she took Amelia's vital signs. The pressures of the medical profession, sometimes it's too much to bear alone. Amelia's room was small but private, with a window overlooking a peaceful lake. She unpacked the few belongings Paul had dropped off, without coming inside to see her. He had sent a text saying the kids now knew the basics of what had happened. Olivia had locked herself in her room and refused to talk about it. Jake had been suspended for fighting. In just 24 hours, Amelia's carefully constructed life had completely fallen apart. During her first group therapy session, Amelia sat silently as others shared their stories. A male doctor from a city hospital described hiding vodka in water bottles during shifts. A nurse talked about stealing pain medication from elderly patients. Their stories were different, but the shame in their eyes matched Amelia's own. When it was her turn to speak, Amelia opened her mouth, but no words came out. The therapist, a woman named Carol with kind eyes and a gentle voice, nodded encouragingly. Just tell us your name, Carol suggested. That's enough for today. Amelia took a deep breath. My name is Amelia, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a surgeon, or I was until yesterday. Back in Riverdale, the hospital board announced a comprehensive review of all procedures and staff monitoring protocols. Dr. Kevin Howard was appointed interim head of surgery, taking over Amelia's patients and responsibilities. In an interview with the local newspaper, he promised to restore public confidence in the hospital. What no one knew yet was that Kevin had deleted dozens of text messages from his phone, messages from Amelia asking him to cover her surgeries on days when she wasn't feeling well, messages that would reveal he had suspected her addiction for months, but had chosen loyalty to a colleague over patient safety. As Amelia lay in her bed at the recovery center that night, staring at the ceiling, the full weight of her actions began to sink in. She had risked patients' lives, destroyed her family's trust, and thrown away a career she had spent decades building. The town that had once looked up to her now viewed her as a cautionary tale. And this was only the beginning of what would become the biggest scandal Riverdale had ever seen. 3 months passed, and the small town of Riverdale remained divided over the scandal. On Main Street, 2 coffee shops sat across from each other. At River Brew, customers wore blue ribbons supporting Amelia. At Joe's Coffee, people signed petitions demanding criminal charges. The town that once united behind their trusted surgeon now argued about her fate at dinner tables in church basements and on social media. At Lakeside Recovery Center, Amelia completed her 90-day program. She sat in Carol's office on her final day, clutching a small box containing her sobriety chip. What happens now? Amelia asked, her voice stronger than it had been in months. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and she had gained back some of the weight she had lost. Carol smiled gently. That depends on what you want, Amelia. Your medical license is still suspended, and will be for at least 5 years according to the board's decision. But your recovery journey is just beginning. Amelia nodded, thinking of the letter from her lawyer that had arrived yesterday. The state had decided not to press criminal charges due to insufficient evidence that she had deliberately endangered patients. It was a small victory, but it didn't change the fact that her career was over. I'm scared to go home, Amelia admitted. Everyone in Riverdale knows what happened. How do I face them? One day at a time, Carol said, using the phrase that had become Amelia's lifeline during recovery. And remember, you're not alone. Your husband has been attending the family support groups faithfully. Paul had indeed visited every week, though their conversations remained tense and awkward. He brought updates about the kids. Jake had returned to baseball after his suspension, and Olivia had finally stopped ignoring questions about her mother. Small steps, but progress nonetheless. That afternoon, Paul arrived to drive Amelia home. The 2-hour car ride was mostly silent until they approached the Riverdale town limits. I should warn you, Paul said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Things have been intense. The town is pretty divided about what happened. Divided how? Amelia asked, watching familiar landmarks pass by her window. Some people are furious, especially families of patients you operated on. Others are defending you, saying one mistake shouldn't erase all the good you've done. Paul sighed. The hospital implemented new drug testing policies for all staff. Dr. Howard has been running the surgical department. At the mention of Kevin Howard, Amelia tensed. She had not told anyone about the texts they had exchanged, about how he had covered for her on days when the pain and drugs made it impossible to work. That was a secret she still kept, even from her recovery group. As they drove down Main Street, Amelia sank lower in her seat, noticing people pointing at the car. Paul turned onto their street, and Amelia was surprised to see several cars parked outside their house. Who's here? She asked nervously. Just family, Paul assured her. Your sister flew in from Oregon. My parents are here too, and a few close friends who've stood by us through everything. Inside, the small gathering welcomed Amelia with cautious smiles and gentle hugs. Her sister Mary cried when she saw her, holding her tight and whispering, I'm so glad you're okay. Olivia hung back, watching her mother with uncertain eyes. When Amelia approached her, the teenager allowed a brief hug before pulling away. Your room is the same, Olivia said stiffly. Dad didn't change anything. It was the most she had said to her mother in months, and Amelia took it as a hopeful sign. Jake was more openly emotional, hugging his mother fiercely. I punched Bobby Miller in the face for talking about you, he told her with a mix of pride and embarrassment. Bobby Miller, Amelia repeated, confused. Diane Miller's son, Paul explained quietly. He's in Jake's grade. The reminder of her former patient sent a wave of shame through Amelia. Diane Miller, the teacher who had been on her operating table when she collapsed. The woman whose life she had endangered. That night, after everyone left and the kids went to bed, Amelia sat with Paul in the kitchen. The familiar space felt strange now, as if she were a guest in her own home. I've been thinking, Paul said, pouring them both cups of herbal tea. Maybe we should move, start fresh somewhere else. Amelia shook her head. Running away won't fix this. I need to face what I did, make amends somehow. How? Your medical career is over. The town is a mess. Our kids are struggling. Paul's frustration was evident in his voice. I don't know yet, Amelia admitted, but I'm not the same person who left here 3 months ago. I need to find a way to make something good come from all this. The next morning, Amelia woke early and sat on the front porch with a cup of coffee. A car slowed as it passed the house, the driver staring openly. Amelia forced herself to raise her hand in greeting, though the car quickly sped away. She was startled when another car pulled into her driveway. A woman got out, Diane Miller, the very patient Amelia had been operating on when she collapsed. Amelia's heart raced as Diane approached the porch. The woman looked healthy, fully recovered from her surgery. Mrs. Miller, Amelia said, standing up. I don't know what to say. Diane stood at the bottom of the porch steps, her expression unreadable. I've been waiting for you to come home. I wanted to see you myself. Amelia braced herself for anger, for accusations. I am so deeply sorry for what happened. There's no excuse for what I did. To her surprise, Diane climbed the steps and sat in the chair beside her. You know, you saved my husband's life 2 years ago. His appendix burst, and any other surgeon would have been too late. Amelia remained silent, unsure where this was going. I was angry when I found out the truth, Diane continued. Furious, actually. But then I started thinking about pain, about how it changes people. My mother suffered from chronic pain for years before she died. I watched it transform her. It doesn't excuse what I did, Amelia said quietly. No, it doesn't, Diane agreed. But it helps me understand it. I forgive you, Dr. Foster. And I'm not the only one. Diane handed Amelia a folded piece of paper. It contained a list of names, dozens of them, with a note at the top. Patients who still believe in you. Tears filled Amelia's eyes as she read the names. People whose lives she had saved, whose children she had brought safely into the world, whose pain she had relieved through her surgical skills. What am I supposed to do with this? Amelia asked, her voice breaking. That's up to you, Diane said, standing to leave. But I think Riverdale needs healing just like you did. Maybe you can help with that, even without a medical license. After Diane left, Amelia sat on the porch for a long time thinking about the woman's words. Inside the house, she could hear her family waking up, starting their day. Outside, Riverdale was still divided, still reeling from the scandal she had caused. For the first time since her collapse in the operating room, Amelia felt something new stirring inside her. Not shame or regret, though those emotions were still present. Something else. Purpose. A chance to rebuild, not the life she had lost, but something new from its ruins. She didn't know yet what form this new purpose would take. But as she folded Diane's list and tucked it into her pocket, Amelia knew the next chapter of her story, and Riverdale's, was just beginning. 2 weeks after Amelia's return to Riverdale, she received an unexpected phone call from Susan Bailey, editor of the Riverdale Gazette. Susan wanted to interview her for a series of articles about addiction in the medical profession. Amelia's first instinct was to refuse, but after a sleepless night, she agreed. They met at a quiet table in the back of River Brew, the coffee shop that had supported Amelia throughout the scandal. Susan arrived with a notebook and recorder, her expression professional but kind. Thank you for agreeing to this, Susan said as they settled with their coffees. I know it can't be easy to talk about what happened. Amelia nodded, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. Why me? Why now? Susan leaned forward. Because your story exposed something bigger than one doctor's addiction. Our investigation has uncovered a pattern of silence at Riverdale General. You weren't the only staff member struggling, just the only one whose problems became public. This surprised Amelia. What do you mean? We've received anonymous tips from hospital employees. They describe a culture where problems are hidden, rather than addressed. Several staff members suspected your addiction but feared reporting a respected surgeon. Susan paused. And you weren't alone in your pain management issues. 2 nurses and another doctor have privately admitted similar struggles. Amelia thought of her recovery group at Lakeside, where healthcare professionals from across the state had shared similar stories. She had assumed Riverdale was different somehow, that she was the exception in her small community. I'll tell you everything, Amelia decided. No more secrets. For the next 2 hours, Amelia shared her full story. The car accident that started her pain, how she began taking extra pills, how she carefully scheduled surgeries around her medication times. She explained how she had convinced herself she was still a good doctor despite her dependency. The most dangerous part was that I was functional, Amelia told Susan. I performed successful surgeries even while impaired. That made it easier to justify, to tell myself I wasn't really addicted, just managing my pain. Susan's article appeared in Sunday's paper with the headline, The Silent Epidemic, When Healers Need Healing. It detailed Amelia's story but placed it within a larger context of healthcare workers nationwide who suffered from addiction, burnout, and mental health issues while continuing to care for patients. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The newspaper received dozens of letters. The hospital's phone lines lit up with calls from concerned patients. The town that had been divided now found common ground in demanding answers. William Carter, the hospital administrator, called an emergency board meeting. Amelia was surprised to receive an invitation to attend. The hospital boardroom was packed. When Amelia arrived, she took a seat in the back, aware of the stares and whispers. William Carter opened the meeting by addressing the article directly. "The allegations in the Gazette are serious," he said. "If there is indeed a culture of silence at Riverdale General, we must address it immediately." Dr. Kevin Howard sat at the table, his face tight with stress. When he spoke, his voice was defensive. "The article makes it sound like we deliberately ignored warning signs. That's simply not true." From her seat, Amelia watched Kevin carefully. She still hadn't revealed their text messages, the times he had covered for her, knowing she was impaired. Part of her wanted to protect him, while another part felt he should face the same accountability she had. An older nurse named Ruth stood up. "I've worked at this hospital for 35 years. We've always looked after our own, kept things private. Maybe that wasn't always the right approach." Others began to speak, staff members admitting they had noticed changes in colleagues but hadn't reported them, administrators acknowledging that their focus on the hospital's reputation might have overshadowed patient safety concerns. Finally, Amelia raised her hand. The room fell silent as she walked to the front. "I was the one who collapsed during surgery," she said, her voice steady. "But I wasn't the only one in that operating room who knew I had a problem. Dr. Howard knew." All eyes turned to Kevin, who paled visibly. "We exchanged texts," Amelia continued. "He covered shifts when I was too impaired to work. He monitored my surgeries when he was concerned about my state. He was trying to protect patients, but also protecting me and the hospital's reputation." Kevin stood up, his hands shaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Amelia was an excellent surgeon even on her bad days. I convinced myself I was keeping everyone safe by watching over her." The room erupted into shocked conversations. William Carter called for order, his face grave. "If this is true, Dr. Howard, your position at this hospital is in jeopardy." Kevin nodded, accepting the consequence. "I understand, and I'm sorry." After the meeting, Kevin approached Amelia in the parking lot. "You could have kept those texts secret," he said quietly. "Why reveal them now?" Amelia looked at her former colleague. "Because healing can't happen without truth. For me, for the hospital, for Riverdale. We all need to stop hiding." The next day, William Carter announced a major overhaul of the hospital's policies. All staff would undergo regular drug testing. An anonymous reporting system would be established for concerns about colleagues. Most significantly, a new support program would be created for healthcare workers dealing with addiction, mental health issues, or burnout. To Amelia's surprise, Carter asked her to help develop the program. "You can't practice medicine," he explained, "but your experience makes you uniquely qualified to create a system that might prevent others from following your path." For the first time since losing her license, Amelia felt useful again. She threw herself into researching similar programs at other hospitals, consulting with addiction specialists and drafting proposals. At home, things were slowly improving. Paul had started joining Amelia for her support group meetings. Jake had returned to his normal self, defending his mother fiercely to anyone who criticized her. Olivia remained more distant, but small moments, asking Amelia to review a biology assignment, sitting beside her during family movie night, suggested a thawing in their relationship. One evening, as Amelia worked on her proposal at the kitchen table, Olivia sat down across from her with her homework. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I have to write a paper about someone who overcame a serious challenge. Would it be okay if I wrote about you?" Tears sprang to Amelia's eyes. "Are you sure? There are many other people you could write about. People who didn't make such terrible mistakes." Olivia shrugged, not meeting her mother's gaze. "Ms. Miller, Diane Miller, my math teacher, she said sometimes the most important stories are about people who fall and then find a way to get back up." Amelia reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'd be honored." Meanwhile, Susan Bailey continued her investigation into the hospital. She discovered that Greg Peters, the pharmaceutical rep who had supplied Amelia with samples, had similar arrangements with doctors at 5 other hospitals in the state. Her reporting led to a wider investigation by state authorities. The scandal that had once seemed contained to one doctor and one small town was expanding, revealing systemic problems that had been hidden for years. And at the center of it all was Amelia, no longer practicing medicine but perhaps doing something equally important, helping break the silence that allowed addiction to flourish in the healing profession. As summer turned to fall in Riverdale, the town's attention began to shift from anger to reform. The blue ribbons supporting Amelia were replaced by purple ones representing addiction awareness. The petitions demanding criminal charges gave way to community forums on healthcare accountability. Amelia still felt the weight of her mistakes, every day. But for the first time since her collapse in the operating room, she also felt something else. Hope that something good might come from the worst mistake of her life. 3 years passed since Amelia's collapse in the operating room. The maple trees along Riverdale's Main Street had shed and regrown their leaves 3 times. The scandal that once dominated every conversation in town had settled into history, though not forgotten. On a bright October morning, Amelia stood at a podium in the Riverdale General Hospital auditorium. Behind her hung a banner that read, "Healing Healers, 3 Years of Progress." A crowd filled every seat: hospital staff, community members, and visitors from hospitals across the state. 3 years ago, I lost everything that defined me, Amelia began, her voice clear and confident. My medical license, my reputation, and nearly my family. I endangered a patient's life because I couldn't admit I needed help. She paused, looking out at the familiar faces. In the front row sat Paul, beaming with pride. Beside him, Jake, now in his first year of college, and Olivia, a high school senior who had recently decided to pursue nursing rather than following her mother into surgery. What happened that day was inexcusable, Amelia continued. But what has happened since gives me hope. Together, we've built something important from the ruins of my mistake. The program Amelia had helped develop, initially just for Riverdale General, had expanded to 15 hospitals across the state. Healing Healers provided confidential support for healthcare workers struggling with addiction, mental health issues, and burnout. Regular wellness checks, mentorship programs, and a strong emphasis on early intervention had changed the culture of silence that once prevailed. William Carter stepped up to the podium after Amelia's speech. The numbers speak for themselves, he announced. Staff turnover has decreased by 30%. Patient satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. And most importantly, 28 healthcare professionals have received help through our program before their issues impacted patient care. In the audience, Susan Bailey took notes for her follow-up article. Her original series on the scandal had won a National Journalism Award and prompted investigations at hospitals nationwide. She had become a trusted friend to Amelia, their unlikely alliance forged through a commitment to truth and reform. After the ceremony, Amelia mingled with attendees in the hospital lobby. A woman approached her, Dr. Laura Peterson, the state medical board representative who had suspended Amelia's license 3 years earlier. That was an excellent presentation, Mrs. Foster, Dr. Peterson said, extending her hand. Your program has become a model for others across the country. Thank you, Amelia replied, surprised by the praise from the woman who had ended her medical career. But I still wish none of this had been necessary. Dr. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. The board has been following your work closely. We've also reviewed all the data from your surgeries before the incident. She lowered her voice. It's remarkable. Despite your impairment, your complication rates were below average. You were an exceptional surgeon, even at your worst. Amelia felt a pang of regret for the career she had lost. That actually made it worse. It helped me justify continuing to operate when I should have stopped. I understand, Dr. Peterson said. But it also shows extraordinary skill. The board will be reviewing your case next month. While full reinstatement isn't possible yet, we're considering a modified license that would allow you to teach at the medical school. No direct patient care, but you could train the next generation of surgeons. The news left Amelia speechless. She had accepted that her days in medicine were over. The possibility of return, even in a limited capacity, had never seemed possible. Think about it, Dr. Peterson said, handing Amelia her card. The formal letter will arrive next week. That evening, the Foster family celebrated at home with a special dinner, Paul had become an enthusiastic cook during Amelia's recovery, discovering a talent for creating healthy, flavorful meals. "To Mom," Jake said, raising his glass, "who proved you can lose everything and still find a way to help others?" Olivia, who had struggled the longest with her mother's disgrace, added her own toast. "And to second chances." Amelia looked around the table at her family, marveling at how far they had come. The crisis that could have destroyed them had ultimately brought them closer, though the path had been painful. After dinner, Amelia sat on the porch swing, enjoying the cool evening air. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane Miller. "Saw you on the local news tonight, so proud of what you've accomplished. Coffee tomorrow?" The woman whose life Amelia had endangered had become one of her strongest supporters and a dear friend. Their unlikely bond symbolized the healing that had gradually occurred throughout Riverdale. Paul joined Amelia on the swing, handing her a cup of tea. "So, Professor Foster, huh? Has a nice ring to it?" "I haven't decided yet," Amelia said, though the excitement in her voice betrayed her true feelings. "It's a big responsibility." "You've earned it," Paul said, taking her hand. "You didn't hide from your mistakes. You used them to help others." The next morning, Amelia drove to the hospital for her weekly support group meeting. She no longer ran the group. That role had been taken over by a qualified therapist, but she still attended as a mentor for newly recovering healthcare professionals. As she walked through the hospital corridors, staff greeted her warmly. The sideways glances and whispers that had followed her early visits had long since disappeared. She was no longer Riverdale's fallen surgeon, but a respected advocate for healthcare reform. The support group that day included 2 new members, a young nurse who had been stealing pain medication and a radiologist struggling with alcohol abuse. Both looked terrified, certain their careers were over. "I know exactly how you feel," Amelia told them. 3 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now. I thought I had lost everything that mattered." She shared her story once again, holding nothing back. The pain that led to addiction, the denial that allowed it to continue, the collapse that exposed it all, and the long road to recovery. "The hardest part wasn't losing my license," she explained. "It was facing the truth about myself and the people I had hurt. But that's also where healing begins." After the meeting, Amelia walked to the hospital cafeteria for coffee with Susan Bailey. They had a standing weekly appointment to discuss progress and challenges in the ongoing healthcare reforms. "I've been thinking," Susan said as they settled at their usual table. "We should write a book together. Your story from your perspective, the broader investigation from mine. It could help hospitals nationwide implement similar programs." Amelia considered the idea. "A few years ago, I would have wanted to hide my story, not publish it. But now?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it's time." As they discussed the book project, Dr. Kevin Howard stopped by their table. After his role in covering for Amelia had been revealed, he had lost his position at Riverdale General. But unlike Amelia, he had fled town, taking a job at a hospital 3 states away. He was back only for the anniversary event. "Amelia," he said awkwardly, "congratulations on the program's success." "Thank you, Kevin," she replied. The anger she had once felt toward him had faded over time. They had both made mistakes, both paid prices for them. "I've started something similar at my new hospital," he admitted. "Nothing as comprehensive as what you've built, but it's a start." Amelia smiled. That's how change happens. One hospital at a time. One doctor at a time. As Kevin walked away, Susan raised an eyebrow. "Forgiveness comes easier these days, doesn't it?" "Not easier," Amelia corrected her. "More necessary. I can't hold others to a standard I couldn't meet myself." Outside the hospital windows, Riverdale stretched out before her, the town that had witnessed her disgrace and her redemption. The community that had been shocked, divided, and ultimately transformed by what had happened in Operating Room 3 years ago. Amelia would never again perform surgery. The lives she might have saved on the operating table were the price of her addiction. But the program she had built was saving different lives now. doctors and nurses who might otherwise have followed her path of silent suffering. She had lost her medical license on that terrible day, but in an unexpected way, she had found a new purpose. Not as Dr. Foster the surgeon, but as Amelia Foster, the woman who fell and found a way to help others avoid the same fate. And in that purpose, she had found something she thought was lost forever: peace.